Hi, I'm Dr. Helen Bowden. I'm a licensed psychologist at CSU Health Network, and I use she, her, and she pronouns. In this video today, I'm going to be talking about shame and conditions of worth and how they impact us and also what to do about it. So what is shame? Shame is this intense feeling that who we are inherently is unworthy in some way. A lot of people get confused between shame and guilt. Shame is more just a general global feeling like I am bad, I'm unworthy of love, I'm unlovable, I'm a screw up, fill in the blank. Whereas guilt is more feeling badly or remorse about something very specific that you did. So like, I accidentally kicked that person in the shin. I feel badly about that, but I am not a terrible person for doing that. I would have to say more than 90% of folks that come through the door here, really one of their root issues is shame. Whether it's because they've heard a lot of messages growing up, whether it's from society at large, whether it's from really negative or traumatic experiences, it leaves them feeling that somehow they're defective, broken, unworthy in some way. And a lot of times this comes from messages we receive and then internalize growing up. And those are called conditions of worth. So we learn that somehow I'm only worthy if, not I am worthy, period. So a lot of times it's I'm only worthy if I look a certain way, I do well in school, or I score that goal during sports. It can be I'm only worthy if I'm perfect, which I hope you know is not possible. But sometimes we're made to feel like it should be possible, and then we develop these really high expectations of ourselves. And of course, we feel like we're always falling short. And so we take those conditions of worth with us throughout all kinds of interactions throughout life. And so whether then we have a natural failure experience, because all humans have failure experiences, if I have that condition of worth, I need to be perfect, I'm going to feel like, see, I'm terrible, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, all these negative labels we're going to apply to ourselves and feel shame, right? And we're even taught that somehow we need shame. And I think that's one of the most challenging pieces in counseling, is because people feel like, if I didn't feel shame, then somehow I'd lay on the couch all day and do nothing. If I didn't feel shame, then I'd be a bad person because it prevents me from doing all these bad things. But the research is super clear. Shame instead, because it leaves us feeling that who we are inherently is unworthy, unlovable, period, and there's nothing we can do about it. So when we feel shame, we feel super hopeless, because what do you do about that, right? If you're inherently unworthy, it sucks our motivation away. We tend to withdraw from other people. We avoid all kinds of stuff, not just people, but we might avoid doing assignments because we're like, well, I suck at them anyway. We might avoid submitting our work. Like if I don't think I'm creative and I'm bad at it, I'm not going to submit my creative works. It can lead us to avoid negative feelings through substances, through self-harm, through like disordered eating behaviors. And so it can actually result in a lot of harm to ourselves and sometimes other people in our relationships as well. Also, shame can make us really inaccurately evaluate a situation. For example, if I fail a test, for example, I might feel like, I'm stupid, I'm a terrible student, why am I even here? I'm just gonna fail it for the semester. And instead of actually maybe motivating me, then I'm like, well, why bother? What's the point? Then maybe I won't study, and then I actually have more failure experiences. Similarly, in relationships too, if I feel like I'm unlovable, I might actually avoid people. I might then stay home. I might then sometimes even act out and push people away on purpose to avoid the future hurt I imagine might happen if I were rejected. And so it actually makes us not be able to see a situation objectively and then learn from the situation, really see like, okay, this part might be true. Like, okay, maybe I did need to study more. However, it's not because I'm stupid. It's because maybe I was feeling really sick and I didn't have the energy or bandwidth. Maybe I was going through a really rough time. And then I can acknowledge that and then get into the next piece, which we'll talk about. What do I do to counter shame so that I can actually move forward, learn from experiences, like actually be more productive and efficient, have better relationships in life. So as promised, what do we do about shame? First, I want to say it is not something that changes overnight, okay? I think it's really important to have realistic expectations for ourselves. Just like anything we're trying to work on that's been around for a really long time, it's going to take a while to sometimes notice those improvements, whether it's how we feel inside, whether it's how we actually behave, anything else that might be impacted by it. So know that if it doesn't change quickly, you are not doing anything wrong, and it's not that it's not possible for it to change. Okay. So number one, it's really important to actually recognize what we are feeling as shame, to call it out. So instead of being like, this is the truth with a capital T that I'm a failure, recognize like, okay, shame is telling me that I am a failure. And so that leaves the possibility it may or may not be true. Spoiler alert, it's not true. But that comes later when we actually can believe that. And as part of that, it's helpful to think about whose voice is that really? Because a lot of times it feels like our voice and the truth, when really if we think back, maybe it's one of our parents' voice, maybe it could be a parent's voice, maybe it's society's voice telling us like who we are because of one of our identities is less worthy than other people. So calling it out and whose voice is that can help us create a little more separation, where then we can actually evaluate the statement and combat it in some way. Second, it's important to try to, as part of that separation, take some perspective. And what I mean by that is to really think about, because when it's us and when we feel shame, it's really hard for us to see like that it might not be true, and to really think about some of the pieces to rationally be like, okay, this, and this is contributing, and this is what I can do about it. So perspective taking can be, if my dear friend, whoever, let's call her Mary, my dear friend Mary were going through this and failed a test, would I say, Mary, you are worthless, you are stupid and lazy, I can't believe you did this, you might as well not even try? I mean, I hope not. I mean, because then maybe you're not the best friend in the world, but I know that you wouldn't actually feel that about someone that you really cared about. And it's so much easier for us to realize that about someone else, because we often are taught to have so much more compassion for other people and taught to be really hard on ourselves. So that can be at least one way to be able to step outside of the shame bubble that we find ourselves in, to evaluate a little bit more. And another one is taking it even further. Does that mean everyone who's ever failed a test in their life is worthless? Again, I hope not, because that would pretty much be almost everybody on the planet. If it's not a test, we've all had failure experiences. And that is another important point, is we're often taught from these shame messages that somehow if I do this, this means I'm unworthy, and not that this is part of normal human experience. It is not possible to get through life without having failure experiences. And often actually that's how we grow, because we don't grow from comfort. It is not possible to go through life without making mistakes, without unintentionally hurting people. So many of these common human experiences. And so that can be a segue into some of the most powerful antidotes for shame, which are self-compassion, or compassion in general, and empathy, where we recognize these contexts. We can say, it is normal to have failure experiences. That does not mean someone is unworthy. It is normal for someone to unintentionally hurt other people, because we don't have that other person's perspective and experiences to know what may or may not hurt them at times. It's so normal to make human mistakes. And that at least creates more room where it moves us away from shame, and that because I did this, I'm unworthy, ergo terrible, etc. Okay. So what really is compassion? Compassion is really treating someone, something with kindness, with understanding, instead of judgment, and instead of criticism and really putting them down in some way for something. And so what does that sound like? It could sound like, for example, that example of I unintentionally hurt my friend, right? Of course, we would never want that to happen. We regret that that happened. So compassion might sound like, I feel badly that I hurt my friend, and I'm going to do what I can to apologize and make reparations. And it is part of normal human experience to unintentionally hurt other people. And what can I potentially learn from this moving forward, knowing that I can't change the past. All I can do is think about what I can take from this situation. And if I am compassionate, then I could actually grow. If I feel shame, on the other hand, what I will likely do is then avoid the situation. I might not apologize, or I might do the opposite. I might excessively apologize and make it about me instead of really addressing the harm that I caused. And I might also avoid that person in the future, or avoid getting close to others in the future if I associate that with such a painful emotion as shame. So really recognizing that, okay, this happened. I did the best I could with what I had and knew in the situation. And you might be like, but did I do the best? What I mean is the best I could with what I had. And you might have had limited emotional bandwidth. You might have other things that you're dealing with, whether it's ADHD, depression, anxiety, etc., that are impacting the situation. There's also really important to think about the context of that. It might also be like, oh, I didn't know that this might have hurt their feelings because I didn't know that they had this trauma, or I didn't know that they were sensitive to this particular issue. Because as much as we try to convince ourselves that we're psychic and we really try to read people's minds, we are not, and we are almost always going to fill in the blank with what we think other people are thinking and feeling with worst case scenario. So really understanding that we couldn't have known a lot of that information can be really important in creating a compassionate context. Empathy can also be super helpful. And what I mean by empathy is when we put ourselves in other people's shoes, when we imagine how someone's feeling, when we actually feel some of those same feelings as the other person and can really connect to and relate. And so getting empathy and compassion from other people can be a really powerful antidote to shame. That's one of the reasons why some of our groups here in group therapy can be so powerful, because shame really makes us want to think that we're alone in the situation, that no one else could have done something as terrible as shame is trying to make us feel that we did. And being in a group context, or even talking to a friend or someone that you trust and care about, can really help give us that perspective that actually so many other people are having the same experience and this feeling. Even if they can't relate to the exact situation, they can 100% relate to any feeling you could possibly throw out there. So empathy can be super important for countering shame. And over time, we can really learn to give that empathy to ourselves that we might also get from other people. Something else that can be really helpful with some of those conditions of worth and feelings of shame can be to really work on intentionally noticing and identifying our strengths, things that maybe go well throughout the day. Because a lot of times when we especially grow up with shame, or there's a lot of different identities we might hold that really make it challenging for us to even recognize some of our strengths, and certainly to talk about them, because we might worry about being arrogant, which, let me tell you, so far over here, I'm not worried about that for you if you're really ashamed, because arrogance is really feeling like you're better than other people, doing things that intentionally put other people down, and being really resistant to any feedback, anything that might challenge that in some way. So that is the opposite. I can say like, hey, I'm a pretty good writer, and that is not arrogant. That is just saying like, hey, I'm a good writer. I'm not saying, and I'm better than everybody else, which would be more arrogant. And so why is that really important? If we go through life, for one, feeling like we're always falling short because we have super high expectations of ourselves, and then noticing every potential way we feel like we're failing or falling short, we're going to end up, of course, feeling way more like failures, and shame is just going to grow. It's like feeding shame big time. Whereas like if we actually have some balance through that, where we're like, oh, I had a creative idea in class today. Oh, I was really helpful to that friend. Or, oh, that was pretty funny what I did earlier. Like, hey, I actually, really worked hard on that and did well. Then we're creating a lot more balance, and then it actually feeds more of a sense of self-esteem. And the other piece, which I think is really important for those who really struggle to recognize strengths, is that if you do not recognize your strengths, you will not use them to their fullest. And again, going back to the creative example, because I identify with that, but if I don't think I'm creative, I am not going to probably write a lot of creative things. I'm not going to submit my creative works. There's going to be little chance then I might get published or actually grow in my career in those things. And so being able to recognize what we're good at is a huge piece of actually being able to work on those, develop a career and actually have better relationships in life as well. And so if you really hard for you, and I'm picking this number out of a hat, but if you practice at the end of the day, writing down even 3 things that are positives, whether it's like, oh, I had that idea, or oh, I did this, that'll actually help you over time then start to intentionally look for those things. It's kind of like a metal detector. If my metal detector is set on I suck, it's only going to look for those things. It's only going to beep on those things, and it's going to ignore every single thing that's not that. So all the good things. And so it's working on really recalibrating that. And that can then over time help us to develop better self-esteem and be a little more resistant to shame. And of course, another wonderful way to work on shame is actually to come in for counseling, because it can be challenging, even though really helpful maybe to talk to a supportive friend. We will be here for you if you want to come in and help you process about what actually started the shame, what contributed it, so we can really dive in and help you better understand it and develop more coping tools and ways to feel better about yourself and to really improve the quality of life and relationships. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today to watch this video on shame and conditions of worth. I know it can bring up some really difficult emotions and maybe some memories for you. So we really encourage you to check out our mental health services here. I'll be posting some links and some resources down below, and also how to stop by in our drop-in hours if you want to meet with a counselor and start some of that individual work. So thanks again, and we'll be coming out with some more videos, so stay tuned in the future.